This episode of Policing Matters is sponsored by Peregrine. Learn more about how you can transform your data into impact at www.peregrine.io. Hey, welcome back. You're listening to Policing Matters on policeone.com. I'm your host, Jim Dudley. And if you're not listening on the podcast, then I hope you're watching on the YouTube channel where you can access any of our 500 podcasts and videos in our archives. Well, we often talk about the use of drones and robots in policing. And I think I cracked the ice with Chula Vista Police Department in Southern California 3 or 4 years ago. I talked to Don Redmond there, talked about their live 911 program. And Chula Vista at the time was considered a pioneer in their extensive use of technology, and they continue to push the envelope. Well, I spoke with Chief Roxanne Kennedy at IACP in Boston just a couple months ago, and she talked about their success. Today, we are taking on the future of law enforcement, drones, robots, and beyond. And nobody better to speak with about all of those things but Eric Wood. Eric was the IT director for Chula Vista Police Department, where he led their technology through several modernizations and innovations, including the Drone as First Responder program and Live 911. He is now the Security and Compliance Manager at Peregrine. Well, welcome to Policing Matters, Eric Wood.
Thank you very much. It's good to meet you and have some great discussion today on some of these topics.
Yeah, so you're non-sworn, right? Haven't worked patrol. You came from a different background, and then you transitioned from policing applications to working at Peregrine. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent most of my career in enterprise IT. So, working at Microsoft for 15 years, delivering infrastructure and security solutions for Fortune 100 businesses that were Microsoft's customers. That was 100% travel for 15 years across the US and some international. And I just about had it from a personal life trade off standpoint. So, when an opportunity came up at my local police department to kind of run their IT show, I jumped at it, and I was looking for a good work-life balance and ability to kind of be of a big fish in a small pond from a talent um, that they wouldn't normally be able to hire, but I'd be able to kind of innovate in a way that be able to kind of show off my skills and push the envelope in a bit, and that was really attractive to me.
Yeah, well, you sure did that. So you're at Chula Vista, and you're going from IT applications to shifting to systems designed specifically for policing applications. What was that learning curve like?
It was really interesting because the dynamics were really about how what drives the way police do fulfill their mission. It was more about the physical space, which is a public space, not where most of my previous work is in the private kind of corporate space where they kind of control that's kind of private industries. So, for example, data is very public and transparent. If you're looking about, well, I want to capture this data, whether it be a camera at a bus stop, well, people are allowed to collect and gather there, and it's kind of a public space, so you can't just say a crowd is gathering there and that's interesting. It's not. It's a bus stop, for example, or something like that. Or hey, an officer is responding to a scene and you know the destination of that incident, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to take the shortest route. There's other aspects to consider about how you respond, and you want to approach from a certain direction. And so you have to really understand and do a lot of ride-alongs to really understand how do officers and agencies respond to emergencies. What is going through their mind? How do they approach the incident? What do they need to know in those 2 to 3 to 6 minutes as they approach the incident? And how do they get that information? And so you just have to understand their world to do your job better in terms of how you design systems to work in those critical moments. And so that was, from the radio systems to the MDCs to the smartphones, to make them all work effectively when they're essentially working them one-handed, driving to an incident. It was just really interesting to have all those meld together and had bring the right context to the officer in those critical moments. It was very interesting.
Yeah, and you had the good fortune of working for Chief Kennedy and her predecessor, both who embraced the new technology, the emerging technology, and went forward with it. Has it always been that way? Have you had to convince people along the way? And I want to ask a follow-up about new leaders that have still held out. What are we saying to them?
Yeah, so it was not always this way. So I remember when I was getting essentially the job offer, the Captain Vern Salee was basically warning me, said, "Hey, before you take this offer and leave Microsoft, just know that from a technology standpoint, Chula Vista PD is a turtle on its back, and I want you to come in eyes wide open to what you're coming into here." And he was not wrong. And so for Chief Kennedy's career at Chula Vista PD, technology was not at all their strength. And so she didn't, at her level, she was a captain when I joined. Technology was not something she had a lot of confidence in because the systems weren't, core systems and capabilities were not reliable. They were going down a lot, and just key things such as printing was even not reliable. It's just kind of, we had to build up the systems and modernize them to a point where we could say, okay, now that we're modernized, now that you can rely upon key systems, now let's try to get into the cloud and cloud services. Now let's try to get into modernizing and leaping forward to where we're now ahead of most other police departments in some of these systems. And so once you start to do some of those things, leadership gets some confidence that they need to take bigger, bolder bets. And so I think once she started to see the technology unit deliver on some of these promises, she started taking bigger, bolder bets with the vision. And it started paying off. And again, it just kind of feeds itself.
Yeah, so the message to a new chief maybe comes into an agency that is a turtle on its back. How do you convince them? I know you go to SHOT Show, you go to IACP or any of these other conferences, and everybody's reaching out at you with a rubber ball or some sort of gizmo they're trying to give away to get you to come in and hear their elevator speech. What's your elevator speech to those new chiefs?
I think so. For Peregrine, or just in general on the investment in technology.
You choose.
So I'm going to give you, I think, Peregrines, because I think it's, if this was 10 years ago, the key challenge affecting the agencies isn't really what Peregrine brings, because the agencies were still purchasing and acquiring technology systems and kind of building these pillars of technologies through acquiring LPR systems and acquiring shot spotters and other kinds of similar capabilities. But now, 10 years later, they've got all these capabilities, right? So now it's, well, the problem is we have all these data silos, but it takes me so long and so much time that it's cost prohibitive from a manpower standpoint for investigations or real-time investigations to really get the intelligence I need in the moment I need it. So whether I'm a real-time crime center kind of operator, or whether I'm a crime analyst trying to bring stats together for a community briefing for the chief or something like that, everything takes too long. Either for an incident that I have to get information out to a responding unit in 6 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it might be, I can't do it with the tools I have that fast. Or if it's for the chief, I can't do it in a day. It takes me 4 to 6 days to get it done. That's what we're seeing. So we need tools that bring all this together. And so Peregrine really does that very well. So that's kind of today, is just think about how you bring your capabilities. You've invested great. Most agencies by this point have invested in all these capabilities, which is great. That's what the transformation's been over the last 10 years, is modernization by expanding your capabilities. But now you just have so many tools in your tool belt that you're fumbling for them all to be effective in the moment. How do we get smart about this, right? How do we get that kind of multi-tool? So that's I think the key message now that I think agencies really need to think about.
Yeah, I mean those first real-time crime centers just turned out to be a big room with a bunch of giant TVs and maybe a couple of computer workstations, and we've gone so far. And I mean, in the last decade, of course, to the last 2 years, I mean, the curve we just keep building so quickly. And now we want data, not now, but right now. And I hear what you're saying, that you can have all these standalone systems in silos and you really need that connectivity. But once you get it, you have all that information at your fingertips.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not used to even now having, once you have that capability, that's now a new muscle you need to build. It's like, how do I change my operations now that I know I can have the answer in minutes or seconds? Now that's a new capability you need to build amongst your skill sets and your people to now be able to react to being able to have the answer that quickly. And so there's a new level of kind of just ed, uh, kind of maturity in your practices and your operations
Hmm.
to respond as quickly as you can develop answers and insights.
Sure. And I know, sometimes convincing the troops or the end users in this case, right? You talked about cop trying to one hand everything while they're driving to a call and they're thinking about what they're doing when they get there. What's been the reaction from the ground level people, the end users? Skepticism still? I hear this saying that says cops don't like two things. One, they don't like change, and two, they don't like the way things are.
Yeah, exactly. You've nailed that. So I'm a big proponent of the tools need to meet them where they are. And so you have to have the context of what is that officer dispatched on? Where are they right now? And so if they're dispatched on a certain type of domestic dispute at a certain address, what do we know about the people there and nearby there? What what are their capabilities of that officer? What are the recent interactions with that people at that location? So what can we tell them and surface for them without making them type everything in and search for it themselves? Can we surface that there's known resist or use of force at that location for the subjects there? Known weapons there. What can we do without making them seek the information out? Because we know they're heading there. These are things that have happened there recently or with the subjects there. Things like that. There's a fourth waiver there, anything like that that we can show without making them search for it. So just kind of knowing the context of what they're doing, so it's more intuitive. I think that's super important for the responding units to make them kind of appreciate it more.
Yeah. Well, I know there's still challenges here in California. We've got a governor who's tried to push through legislation to limit the use of technology, AI, drones, and right now the government's looking at banning foreign-made drones. There's drone buyback programs now out there. Um, how are we dealing with these programs? I know right now we're having, it seems like a domino effect of agencies that are getting clearance to step away from the drone monitoring, that you have to have that live drone operator watching the drone. And I think NYPD and was it Campbell? I know another agency got the approval to fly drones without having that observer.
Yeah, there's some very interesting waivers that deal with some kind of close proximity to structures where obviously manned aircraft won't be flying. There's some very interesting waivers coming out, which is creating some opportunities for more urban airspace, which is interesting. It doesn't apply everywhere, but in certain use cases, it's allowing some more kind of DFR opportunities that would otherwise be difficult for line of sight operations, and also lowering the cost because you have to pay for an observer on top of a building, and it obviously increases your cost of operations. So these are great things, but again, kind of specific use cases where they are helpful. But
Mhm.
going back to your comment or question about kind of the restrictions and privacy constraints that maybe in California, Governor Newsom might be and so applying and so forth. It's there's always going to be some constraints, and I think to some degree it can be helpful because there are obviously privacy advocates that want there to be some friction involved here. And so I think to some degree that's helpful that there are some hurdles, but the greater thing, I think, the greater pressure is that as long as you're implementing or incorporating community engagement in saying, hey, here's our kind of concept of operations, here's how we're going to use the program, whether it be LPR, whether it be drones first responder, whatever the program might be, you're incorporating community feedback, you're doing outreach to privacy advocate groups to build your agency's policy, you're transparent about the use of the system, that your local community engagement in the drafting of your kind of con ops is so much more important, so much more, I think, critical to the success of the program than the kind of the state level programs or restrictions. That's what I've seen, at least in operations I've been closer to. The one, I guess, a couple exceptions I'd say is things such as facial recognition, which Governor Newsom shut down in California outright without any kind of path forward. So that's kind of a little frustrating that there isn't kind of a public-private partnership to establish criteria and kind of a go-forward plan. What does success look like to get this more adopted? It's just kind of gone dark. So that's frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're increasing the or reducing the error rate in AI and facial recognition. I'm hoping that there's a breakthrough sometime
Yeah.
soon there. Hey, I'd like to ask you some more about policies and some of the newer technology and maybe what's holding us back a little bit. What's the next breakthrough? But first, I want to take a moment and thank our sponsor. Peregrine's real-time decision and operations management platform empowers law enforcement agencies with the data they need to solve their hardest problems and do their best work. Through advanced data integration technology, Peregrine maximizes the impact of your real-time crime center by centralizing and organizing historical and real-time data, making it readily accessible and actionable in the moments that matter most. Visit peregrine.io to learn how your organization can get started. That's peregrine.io. And we're back, and I'm speaking with Eric Wood, Security and Compliance Manager at Peregrine. He was the IT innovator at Chula Vista Police Department. And right now, we're talking a little bit about all the applications out there, ALPRs, gunshot detection, other alerts. Are there breakthrough technologies out there that we're waiting for, that they're just being held up by uh, R&D or legislation? What's coming next?
I think obviously, especially at this point, AI is the biggest elephant in the room in terms of breakthrough technology that is probably does not at all have a clear path towards how are we going to incorporate it in public safety use cases, justice use cases, because there's no clear kind of explainability to it that would uphold under inspection and justification in court on the fairness of it. And the science behind it, because even the model developers can't explain how it comes to some of its conclusions and predictions. And so, therefore, it's really hard to introduce it as any kind of evidentiary based system. So, that unfortunately, that's a big reason why facial recognition, as I mentioned, is going to be difficult to introduce. But obviously, we still rely upon humans to do facial rec in a six-pack lineup, and we trust that in court as how we brought a certain suspect in front and made an arrest and so forth. So it's interesting that we'll still rely on human judgment, but won't rely on measurements done by computers in terms of, you know, geometrics of faces and so forth. So I think that there's work that needs to be done. The problem is there's no government funded or coordinated activity to do that work between public private partnerships and so forth. And I think that's the missed opportunity, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think, we have a Department of Justice that's doing the best they can, I suppose. And when they put a consent decree on an agency that looks like they've been fallen down on the job, whether it's, excessive force or unfair hiring practices, it would be great to see some technology assistance. Uh, when we rolled out NIBRS, the National Incident-Based Reporting System, a departure from the FBI Uniform Crime Reports, there was a precipitous drop off, and it was bad timing. 2020 was not the best time to roll out the conversion. And so we went from 85, 90% of police agencies reporting down to 50%. I think we're up a little higher. Is AI going to be helpful there in generating these reports where we'll see more and better data supplied to FBI for the database for our national crime stats?
Obviously, I think it will, but I'm also very nervous. Like, obviously, Axon is currently using AI to generate some reports from body worn camera audio, but I also am currently doing some innovative technology with AI right now as a side effort, and I'm very close to it, and I see how often AI is well-meaning, but still gets things a little bit wrong. But I also have to keep that in mind that, so do people. And so is it I think the bar is not, is it perfect? Is it at least as good, or if not better? Better is great than people, but at least as good as your general officer would be at writing a police report in certain terms of the number and severity of any errors or and so forth. And that's a hard thing to gauge, but that's kind of what we need to aim for. And I don't know that we're measuring that yet. And so that's why I'm a little hesitant to say that we this is where we should really be investing deeply in saying, yes, we should write all reports using AI today. But I do think it's an area we should be investing in trying to get there so that we can get police out of the computer screen and back out there on the street enforcing crime and public safety and so forth. So that's where we need them. So if we can make them more efficient and essentially kind of extrapolate out the number of officers we have by getting them away from computers, or limiting their time on computers, writing police reports, the better. And that's what's going to help retention as well. They don't want to spend their time on computers. So I think that's the right thing to solve. I just don't think we're just very much at the beginning stages currently.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, especially in this really harsh recruiting environment, we're thinning ranks. I think AI and any sort of assistance that they could give us in report writing. I know the hesitancy can be in the accuracy. I've tried to use dragon speech before. I've tried taking notes on my phone while I think of something on a walk or while I'm walking my dog. And I come back and sometimes it is so jumbled, I don't even know what I was saying at the time. So there's the human error factor, but if we're signing off on AI generated reports, we have to make sure that they're accurate because it could really get a police officer into trouble. They could lose a case. It can end up with them being on a Brady list or a list saying that they weren't being truthful, even though it wasn't intentional. So I agree with you there. We've got to be really intentional and we've got to be accurate and make sure these things work the way they're supposed to before we roll them out and start relying on them.
Yeah, exactly. And these same kind of human errors, even at the review and supervisory level, those happen as well. Things are missed at each stage today on the human process. But obviously, if we're going to replace or at least automate some of these steps, they should at least exceed the quality of the human process, or otherwise, what are we doing? So yeah.
Yeah, well, it seems like every conference, every road show, I'm sure SHOT Show's got a bunch of things they're showing in force use, weapons, technology. Uh, what's the latest? I'm going to wrap it up by giving you the floor and asking you what you're working on, what we could expect to see next.
Well, one thing I'm excited about right now that I'm working on is the use of large language models along with organizational data, communication data, files, all kind of, let's say if you're an agency or a company, but all your organizational data plus the power of a large language model to basically create a virtual uh, employee, if you will, that is an expert on all your organizational processes, procedures, tools, methods, and can be consulted upon for any answers, guidance. Say, hey, I need to know in this situation, what should I do? Here's my parameters. Let's say here's a scenario that's actually, I remember from a patrol officer, or actually, as a watch commander at Chula Vista, asked me this. Hey, it doesn't happen all the time, but a patrol officer gets in a collision and they know our agency policy or procedure on how to handle it, what reports to write up, how to handle it, and so forth. And they don't know, where do they go and look for it? How to, what's the checklist and so forth. And so, wouldn't it be great if they could just, hey, I've just been in a collision, give me the procedure, give me the checklist. Well, if you had kind of an AI bot that would just say, here you go, do this, do this, do this. If this is true, do that, do that, do that. And so all this knowledge is spread across different places within the agency's knowledge. Some of it's in SharePoint, some of it's in email, some of it's in policy procedures, some of it's over here. But knowing how to search for that based on search terms, that patrol officer or that sergeant doesn't know that search term. And so you have to know which terminology to find it in which location of data repository. So it's a broken process to get this organizational knowledge. So use AI to find it for you. And so it just makes the organization more effective by using AI, but AI on itself, like ChatGPT, wouldn't know this information about your organization. So you have to feed it. And so kind of bringing those together as a resource to all your employees is kind of something I'm working on.
Yeah, that's great. Sort of like a Siri for police work.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
Yeah,
Siri, hey Siri, I just got in a wreck. Who should I call?
or in this situation, which I haven't confronted before, do I need to bug a patrol sergeant or lieutenant? Do I need to wake the chief? Do I need to, maybe I do, right? But
Hmm.
do I need to bother an expert or someone's more senior, or can I answer the question myself based on all the information about the organization has, right?
Hmm.
Can I just tap into it with a simple question?
Yeah, well, I'm sure we would have a lot of binders on the fire once that comes out because I remember every office I've ever had, there were at least 10 binders on the shelf that I never cracked during my tenure there. Moved on to another office where there were another 10 binders of stuff.
It's
So,
just so hard to find stuff that you're looking for based on how it was organized by the person who built those binders.
yep, yep. And updating. So, a lot easier
Yeah,
to update an IT system than rewrite a binder. So, well,
yeah,
good luck with that. We could use it.
yeah. Appreciate it. This has been a great chat. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks. Eric Wood, Security and Compliance Manager at Peregrine, done so much work with Chula Vista PD in Southern California. Their live 911 system, their drones as first responders, a lot of breakthroughs happen there. So good to have somebody like Eric Wood working on the next steps in the future of technology and policing. Thanks so much, Eric.
Thank you.
All right, to our listeners, hey, thanks for listening and let me know what you think. What did we miss? Hey, what else do you need to hear about and who do you need to hear about it from? Drop me a line at policingmatters@policeone.com. That's policingmatters@policeone.com. And I hope to hear from you. Well, take good care, stay safe, and I hope to talk to you again real soon.